There's been a lot of talk about security with code apps as of late, and it's a question we get quite frequently. So, in today's episode, we're going to demystify that and talk you through how safe code apps actually are. Charles, do you want to take it away?
Thanks, Josh. It's easier than ever to create an app, and it's easier than ever to generate a ton of code, which means that basically anyone right now can generate a web app, right? Just forgetting about code apps for a second. And if just about anyone can create a web app, then why can't they just do that? Like, why do they need Power Platform in the first place? Well, what we're showing here is that yes, anyone can start, but let's say that you've built like a basic app. How do you then connect to your data? Like you need a database somewhere or something like that. Maybe you need to connect to other data sources. Maybe you need to connect to something that has all of the employees in your organization. And then you also need to think about, well, authentication, making sure that that's sorted and that's secure, making sure that you're not leaking any data anywhere, making sure that then you deploy it and you have some kind of pipeline with application lifecycle management, something along those lines. You start talking about all of these things and then you realize, well, actually, building the app really was the easy part. The difficult part is all of the stuff around it.
And I think that leads on quite nicely into the part of AI taking people's jobs. And it's easy to get caught up in that hype. But the reality is, you still need subject matter experts in these things. If you're a developer, you're very familiar with all the security aspects, all of the back end and the front end pieces that join the dots. And those elements, if you don't know that, are easy to forget because AI is just doing it all for you and you think that's good. But the reality is much different from that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are things to be careful of course, right? We've got this guy here with an injection. He's looking to get to us. So, Josh, you want to tell us a bit about this one?
Yeah, I think the kind of takeaway here is that if you're using AI to prompt the building of an app, you need to watch what you're doing, especially if you're using things like skills and you're maybe grabbing skills from the web and not looking through them. There could be malicious things in those skills that could have consequences. There have been known prompt injection attacks, and those attacks can maybe install something you shouldn't do, or get the AI to go kind of rogue and do something, again, that it shouldn't do. So, yeah, it's really important that if you're using AI, you're using instructions, skills, plugins, whatever it is you're using, you are looking through all of that information that the skills bring to the table, and they're not dodgy. Make sure you're grabbing them from a reputable source, and yeah, just looking through them to make sure that they're doing what they say on the tin effectively.
And then the other side to this, where it says about protecting sensitive data, be aware of what data you're actually entering into your prompt or sending with your prompts and where that data might be going. So
Mm.
if you're using an Anthropic model and you're based in the UK, do you have that enterprise agreement where your data is not going outside of the UK? Just be aware of where your data is going and who it's going to. And are you happy with that? It's really important. So there's also NPM security. So watch our previous videos if you don't know what NPM is. It's a node package manager. So it's basically a way of getting packages off the internet so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, essentially. But when you're doing that, is that NPM package that you're installing a legitimate package? Is it safe? But it's not even just that. But you also want to bear in mind, like all of these packages that you add, who's created them, like who's maintaining them? There was an instance in the past where there was a package that was used by, I think it was used by millions of projects, that someone changed the code in it to something rogue. And then when those projects updated, they then brought through that rogue code. So you just want to be careful. There is a limit to how much damage it can do, but it's still going to be able to run JavaScript code on your machine or potentially trigger other things, like not just JavaScript. So yeah, be very careful about what NPM security you're thinking about. You want to really scan things and make sure that you're happy with them.
Yeah, there's been a lot of attacks recently, a lot of npm vulnerabilities discovered. So yeah, just make sure you understand what it is you're actually downloading or installing as part of your npm stuff, and you should be good. So next up, we've got obviously the fact that we can build code apps with the complete customized UI and the full control that we get that code apps brings to the table. And we get that all within Microsoft's Power Platform. So the benefits we get there is great. You know, if you've been working with Power Platform for many years, like me and Charles have, then you understand that you get things like the Entra auth, the connectors, the security through that, the data policies, the ALM, all of these things all bundled into that platform level means that you've got a secure code app from the get go, which is fantastic. You don't have to worry about all of those different things that if you're building this as a pure web app that you would need to worry about. So yeah, this is where the benefits really, in my opinion, start to stack up compared to a web app.
Yeah, massively. So with a code app, it's an internal app, which means that you don't have to worry about external people getting access to it. By default, it's secure. And yeah, like you say, where you've got connectors and things like that, it's all managed within the platform through data policies. And yeah, what a platform it is. Also, the other thing to bear in mind is that with licensing at the moment, if you have Power Apps Premium, it means that you can run as many code apps as you like. So until that changes, that is a massive bonus if that ever changes.
Yeah, huge bonus to have. I think the licensing option is even more compelling now because you're now getting code apps as an additional option as part of your licensing. So fantastic to be getting that and not have to pay any extra. It's effectively a brand new thing for free on that existing license.
Yeah, so this does really help us to govern and secure the platform. Let's have a look at the actual details of it, right? So the first thing that we've got here is connectors. So what does that mean for us, Josh?
Yeah, so if you're new to Power Platform and you don't understand or haven't worked with it before, we've got this concept of connectors. And this is the way that Power Platform basically can make API calls to these services in a secure way. Rather than having to do direct fetch calls, you're just going through these connectors, and these connectors are available in Canvas apps as well, and um, Power Automate. This is how you connect your data, and the ability to use them in code apps means that well, we're not doing rogue API calls or things that can't be audited. We're doing it through the connector route. So we're following those best practices that Microsoft give us, which is, in my opinion, a great thing to be kind of following and adhering to as part of code apps.
So all of those 1,700 plus connectors, they're there for code apps to use, just like you're trying to attack that SharePoint connector, right? So another thing to just drill home is that all of those controls that we're used to will still apply. The fact that it's a code app and not a Canvas app doesn't really matter. So whether it's that Entra authentication, whether it's someone opens up a code app and it needs to use a particular connector, the end user will still get that connector permission dialog saying, are you happy to connect to this? Sharing limits still apply in the same way. So you can lock down a code app to say, I only want this to be shared with 10 people or however you want it to be done, or you want to share it via security groups, same thing. Data loss prevention policies are now called data policies. So that's regarding your connectors and whether they should be allowed or blocked. Same thing applies. Conditional access for your Microsoft 365 tenant, same thing applies. And then also ALM and just general health, it still applies. So in the admin center, you can see how long your code apps are taking to run, just in the same way that you can do with your Canvas app. So it's all there. It's just it just makes it a no-brainer, really, doesn't it, to just jump across from a Canvas app to a code app if you have the licensing.
Agreed. And the granularity we get here with all of these features versus having to code this from scratch as a web app, I think is really powerful as well, and something that can kind of get missed or forgotten about in the AI kind of world. Well, I'll just vibe code it. But the reality is it's actually really difficult to do some of these things, even with AI, and it's time consuming. But we've just got this out the box in Power Platform, which is great. It means we don't have to worry as much about any of these additional things because it's just part of the platform. So yeah, big benefit in my opinion, big plus for code apps.
Absolutely. And just going back to that point about connectors. So if a connector is blocked, then it means that no matter what the maker does in building that code app, it's not going through. The admin policy is what's going to dictate what's okay and what's not okay. And the maker cannot get around that. So that's just really important just to drive that point home. What it does mean, though, is that, well, what happens if I want to connect to something where there's not a connector? How am I going to go about that? So then we would use something called content security policy, would we? Or maybe not. So what is content security policy? So content security policy is basically where we're wanting to block external calls, or we want to block some external calls but let other ones through. So it might mean that we decide actually we'll let fonts and images come through from external sources, but frames and forms and workers we won't let come through. It's that kind of concept. What I want to do is just very quickly show where that lives in the admin center so that it makes a bit more sense. So here we are in the admin center. We're on the Office Lunch environment. And if I go to settings and then I expand product and then go to privacy and security and then scroll down all the way down on the bottom on the right hand side here, we've got content security policy. Now, this is where you can manage whether a model driven app, a Canvas app, or a code app can communicate with the external world basically via fetch or API requests using JavaScript. So in a model-driven app, you would have your web resource, right? And that can communicate with the outside world by default. Or maybe you don't want that to happen, so you can enforce content security policy. The same thing with a Canvas app, but not with a JavaScript web resource this time. This time we're talking about PCF controls. So if you want to block a PCF control, PCF component from speaking to the outside world, this is the way you can do it. Or maybe you want it to only speak to certain endpoints. That's where you can do it. Rather than if we go to the settings and then to the features, here we can turn it on and off in totality. So we've got the Power Apps component framework for Canvas apps turned off, which means we can't use it. But what happens if we want to allow it, but just with some caveats? Well, we could turn on content security policy and say, you're allowed to use this, but you can only speak to this particular API. Well, with code apps, at some point, they're going to be turned on by default, but the content security policy is also turned on by default. So this is something that's really important to bear in mind from a governance perspective. When they get turned on by default, people are going to be able to use them, but you don't have to worry so much because the content security policy is already on by default for every environment that's created. And so within this, you can see it's on and it's blocking all of these different things.
It's a lot of options.
So as a very basic example, we've got use default font source. So the default font source is basically saying like, this is a font that can load from outside of my Power App runtime, outside of my tenant. So maybe we want to use Google fonts. We want to hot link to a Google font. I wouldn't recommend doing that. So I would recommend not turning it off the block. And instead, I would recommend just leaving everything on and then going down a different route. And we'll talk a bit more about that. So yeah, just be aware that content security policy is something that is really protecting you and it's enforced by default. And I would recommend not turning it off and not having exceptions. But as I mentioned before, what happens if we've got an endpoint that we want to get to and we don't have a connector for it? Well, in that situation, what we would do is we would create a custom connector, and the custom connector would then communicate with that API, and then we would allow the custom connector via our data policy. That's the secure way of doing it, and that's the way that we can manage what's actually happening from a governance level, from an admin level, and also from a maker level or a developer level. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
Of course, this is easier than ever now with vibe coding, AI assisted development, whatever you want to call it, because you don't actually need to know the code to create a custom connector. You just get AI to help you with it. So it becomes really easy to do now, which is great. So you can create these custom connectors, easier than ever, and bring them as part of your governance policies and framework. And yeah, you can have a nice cohesive governance structure there to kind of play nice with, which is great.
That's right. And when you're creating your custom connector, you can just take screenshots of it, paste it into your AI agent that's helping you, and it can then read those images and then respond to you saying, like, this is what you fill in for this input, and this is what you fill in for this input. So yeah, as you say, Josh, it's just so easy now. So in summary, you bring your custom code, your code app, and then you bring it to a secure platform. So it's a platform where data policies are in place to protect you, and content security policy is in place to protect you. But we do need to always be aware of those two things we have in the middle. Those NPM packages, try and minimize the amount of dependencies you've got and review every package that you're installing and make sure you're definitely happy with it. And then also the agent, making sure that whatever information is going to that agent is information that you're happy with.
So hopefully that's been helpful. Obviously, lots to learn, but the summary is code apps are secure. They're part of the Power Platform. We get all of this nice stuff, governance, compliance features out of the box. And, the next time you're thinking around code apps and whether they're secure, you can have confidence in that they are. So until next time, do remember to like and subscribe if you found this useful. And please leave a comment below if there's anything you'd like us to cover in a future video.